They say a new baby brings a family closer. For me, it was the night my world quietly broke apart and nobody even noticed. My name is Isla Bennett. I grew up in a sleepy coastal town outside Charleston, South Carolina, where the humid summers dragged on and neighbors waved from crumbling porches. As a little girl, I thought my family was just like everyone else's. Dad taught history at the local college, and Mom worked early morning shifts baking at the town café. We weren't wealthy, but life felt full. I was their only child for a time, and I truly believed I was everything they needed. Mom would braid my hair before dawn, and Dad would take me crabbing at the pier every Sunday. On warm nights, we'd sit on the back steps with slices of watermelon, laughing as fireflies blinked across the fields. I thought that was what love looked like. Everything changed one stormy night in September 2004, just after my 9th birthday. I woke to pounding on the front door and the flashing red and blue of an ambulance in the driveway. My Aunt Marlene hurried me into a jacket, her face pale. Mom had gone into labor early, she said. My brother Caleb was fighting to breathe in a NICU 2 towns over. I was too young to understand, but deep down, I felt it. Life would never go back to how it was. Caleb was tiny, translucent, barely moving under a web of wires. "No touching," Mom said sharply, her eyes never leaving the machines. When I reached out, her hand caught mine. Not with love, but fear. When Caleb finally came home, the house turned cold. Air purifiers whirred constantly, the scent of bleach soaked into everything. If I so much as sneezed, I was packed off to Marlene's house. At first, I thought it was an adventure. Marlene made chocolate pancakes and let me stay up late reading. But slowly, it sank in. I was an outsider in my own family. I brought home my first perfect science quiz, beaming with hope. Mom glanced at it, murmured something about Caleb needing new humidifiers, and moved on. Dad ruffled my hair absently. No hug, no sparkle in his eyes. I was still breathing, but somehow it felt like I'd disappeared. I drew sketches, won first prize in the 8th grade science fair, and spent hours telling Mom about the ancient civilizations I was reading about. But every time my efforts were brushed aside with the same tired phrases. Caleb has a low-grade fever. Caleb's finally sleeping. Isla, sweetheart, keep it down. Slowly, I learned to vanish. I retreated into my room, the one space that always smelled faintly of peppermint, the one scent Caleb couldn't stand, so he stayed away. In that tiny sanctuary, I lost myself in the world of art history, antiques, and the imagined lives behind faded paintings and cracked frames. But worse than being ignored was the way they rewrote the story of who I was. Isla's always been tough and self-sufficient, Mom would tell the neighbors when they asked about me getting into the advanced program. She knows Caleb needs extra support. No, I didn't know. I only knew I once had a family that made space for me, and then one day, they didn't. It was as if all the warmth had been sucked out, and I was left orbiting around them, forgotten. The hugs, the "we're proud of you" moments, those were reserved for Caleb. I didn't need any of that, apparently. "Isla's the strong one," Mom would say with a dismissive smile. But being strong doesn't mean you don't need love. At 13, I found my first real refuge. A bakery tucked off the main street called Sweetgrass and Sage, run by a woman named Miss Eleanor. She never asked why a 13-year-old girl wanted to mop floors and sell muffins after school. She just handed me an apron and said, "Everyone deserves a place they can shine." I never forgot that. Every day after school, I scrubbed counters, stacked scones, and polished glass displays. At home, I'd quietly finish homework at my rickety desk by the window. Nobody asked where I went or what I did. So long as I kept quiet, so long as I didn't upset Caleb. Caleb never washed a dish, never carried a backpack bigger than a folder. Family showed up with banners and balloons for every single piano recital or spelling bee he entered. Me? Even when I scored a perfect 1600 on the SAT, Mom just said, "That's nice, Isla," while helping Caleb pick colleges he hadn't even toured yet. During my senior year, I applied to 12 universities. Quietly, during bakery breaks, with Miss Eleanor gently coaching my essays. She proofread my applications and even taught me how to write like my voice mattered. I applied for every scholarship I could find, merit-based, need-based, anything that might get me away. Then, one steamy afternoon in early May, while wiping down the bakery's front windows, my phone buzzed. An acceptance to Duke University. Full ride, honors program. My breath caught in my throat. Miss Eleanor grabbed me in a hug that smelled of flour and vanilla, and for the first time I let myself cry. That night, I brought the acceptance letter home. I placed it on the counter while Mom was folding Caleb's laundry. She glanced at it, murmured, "Good job, honey," and went back to sorting his soccer jerseys. "And maybe don't mention it too much," she added. "Caleb's a little stressed with finals." I nodded, folded the letter, and tucked it away. A week later, they threw a party when Caleb was voted most likely to succeed at his high school. They hung his photo, a grinning teenager with a plastic trophy, right above the fireplace. They called him the family's future. I looked at his photo, then at my own worn backpack stuffed with college forms, scholarships, dreams. It was in that moment I knew, no matter how bright I shined, they'd already decided where their hearts belonged. But this time, I had a ticket out. This time, I had carved a door for myself. At Duke, I majored in art history, chasing the love of old relics and forgotten beauty that Grandma Marlene once showed me. I remembered her letting me dig through shoeboxes of old brooches, pieces nobody else valued, but I could see their hidden magic. And that instinct, the one that could see what others dismissed, would one day become my greatest strength. Graduating with honors, I landed an internship at a boutique antique jewelry appraisal firm in Charlotte. While others chased fast money, I pulled on white gloves, bent over velvet trays, and studied the overlooked. Because I knew better than anyone, some of the most priceless things in the world are the ones nobody thought to notice. At the time, I didn't know those forgotten trinkets would change my life. The first shift came from a brooch, tucked into a box labeled costume jewelry, assumed to be worth maybe $50. But the moment I picked it up, something in me stirred. It wasn't flashy, simple even, but the engraving was impossibly fine, the enamel flawless. On the back, almost hidden, was a tiny hallmark, worn thin by time. That night, I stayed up researching it. Turned out it belonged to a French jeweler who had crafted pieces for aristocrats before his studio was destroyed during the First World War. The brooch wasn't just real, it was rare beyond measure. And you hit a tender spot that made them laugh out loud. I presented my findings at a small staff meeting, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I came with documents, historical comparisons, even museum archive prints I convinced a librarian friend to dig up. The result? The brooch's valuation jumped from $40, 0 cents, to over $12,000, 0 cents. And when it hit the floor at a Charleston showcase, it sold for over $40, 0 cents. For the first time, my name appeared in the firm's company email. Isla has a sharp eye. I kept working like nothing happened, but somehow, misjudged pieces kept landing in my hands. An enamel locket from a pawn shop turned out to be Imperial Russian. A simple wedding band turned out to be part of a limited Boston heirloom collection. Slowly, my supervisors trusted me with bigger collections. One afternoon, over lemon tart at a dusty little café, my manager, Miss Langston, asked, "Isla, have you ever thought about going solo?" I laughed, the broke girl still living off peanut butter sandwiches. She smiled knowingly. Exactly. Hunger sharpens the vision. Those words never left me. I started taking small independent jobs on the side, verifying pieces for local antique stores, family estate sales, mom-and-pop jewelers who couldn't afford the flashy firms. I charged less but left no flaw unnoticed. Patient. Relentless. One night, I dug through my old things and found Grandma Marlene's worn notebook. On the first page, she had scribbled, "It's not the jewel, it's the eye that sees the jewel." I understood then, if my family had overlooked me, I would never overlook myself again. At 27, I opened my own appraisal office. A tiny second-floor walk-up above a pizza joint in downtown Charlotte. The desk wobbled. The ceiling leaked in spring. The sign I hung on the door read, "Silver light and ivy." Silver light for the way old metal shimmers, and ivy for how I swore I'd grow, even in the cracks no one else saw. No one knew. Not my family. Not even Caleb. They still thought I worked part-time somewhere, probably shelving books or doing secretarial work. Meanwhile, I was verifying Depression-era engagement rings for lawyers, appraising lost collections found in old barns, and tracing the provenance of heirlooms back to European dynasties. One client turned into 3. 3 turned into 10. By the end of my second year, I had a street-level office with glass windows and a hand-painted sign. I hired Maya, a geology graduate with a patient eye and a heart full of questions. I taught her how to find the soul in a gemstone, how to trust the tiny voice that whispers. By year 5, we had offices in Charlotte, Charleston, and Nashville. We authenticated million-dollar estate sales. We advised museums. We were invited to national appraisal symposiums. By then, my net worth quietly surpassed $12 million, 0 cents, with another $500,000 in ongoing contracts. And still, I lived simply. An old blue sedan. A modest craftsman house outside Charlotte. No Instagram announcements, no champagne parties. Because I wasn't building a brand. I was building a life no one could take away. At Sunday dinners, I still listened to Mom talk about Caleb's newest ambitions, Lily's next potential career switch, Dad's advice to find a stable job with benefits. I smiled politely while slicing roasted chicken, the weight of diamond appraisals and antique contracts tucked neatly away inside my quiet, steady hands. They didn't know, but soon they would. Conversation drifted easily around the table, Lily showing off a new designer bag she claimed was from a massive sale, even though one glance told me it was a limited edition piece. Never discounted, not anywhere. Whenever anyone asked about me, I just smiled politely. Same old, I said. A few vintage appraisals, some authentication work. No one asked for more details. No one noticed that the pearl necklace I wore once belonged to an Edwardian countess, or that the delicate ruby brooch pinned to my jacket was an early 20th century French artisan design. They assumed it was all flea market junk. I didn't bother correcting them. Once, Lily joked between mouthfuls of turkey, Isla probably has enough old jewelry to open a pawn shop. I just smiled, poured myself some cranberry juice, and replied, maybe someday. I could have said it all. About the major auction contracts, the museum partnerships, the 6-figure appraisals. I could have told them that the designer bracelet Lily wore was a poorly made replica, but I didn't. Because sometimes, silence is the only crown the overlooked get to wear. At the end of my 5th year running Silverlight and Ivy, I began quietly sending money to my parents. At first, it was $3,000, 0 cents a month. Then $5, 0 cents. Then $7, 0 cents. When Lily switched her major yet again, this time to interior design, the same dream I once had but couldn't afford, Mom called me one Sunday night. Isla, she said after some polite small talk, your father's pension isn't enough, and tuition at Parsons is outrageous. I was reviewing a $400,000 0-cent estate jewelry appraisal at my desk, nodding as if she was asking for grocery money. Can you help, just for a while, maybe $7,000, 0 cents a month? Of course, I said simply. I didn't mention that Lily hadn't finished a single program in 6 years. I didn't ask why she wasn't working or applying for scholarships. I set up an automatic monthly transfer, family support, tuition assistance. Every time the payment went out, I reminded myself I wasn't doing it because they deserved it. I was doing it because I could. Because I was stronger now. Isla Bennett. Meanwhile, Mom told the neighbors I lived so simply, as if I was still scraping by, surviving on canned soup and city buses. I pretended not to see Lily posting selfies from Caribbean resorts, captioned, I earned this after a hard semester. At a Sunday dinner, while I was carving a roast, Lily smirked. Ever thought about getting an MBA, Isla? Might help with your little jewelry job. Mom didn't laugh. She nodded seriously. She's right. You need a master's degree these days to be taken seriously. I sipped my water, staying silent, all while knowing I'd just signed a $2,500,000 0 cents contract to authenticate pieces for a private New York gallery's grand opening. They didn't know. They never asked. At one of Lily's boyfriend's birthday parties, after a few drinks, I heard later from a client, one of the guests, that Lily had bragged. My sister. No clue why she's still chasing old junk. Our parents still help her with rent out of pity. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't even feel anger. Just that vast, echoing emptiness you feel when you're standing at the top of a mountain and you realize your family never even tried to climb with you. They just waited for you to lower the rope. I stayed silent. Like those forgotten brooches tucked into dusty boxes, the rarest treasures are the quietest. But something shifted when Lily posted about her newest reward, a limited edition BMW Sports Coupe, price tag close to $90,000, 0 cents. Hard work pays off, her caption read, sparkled with emojis. Mom called me a few days later, voice shining with pride. Did you see, honey? Lily's doing so well, handling everything by herself now. She's really going places. I smiled into the phone, but inside, something finally cracked. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was simply finished. I hadn't planned to host Thanksgiving that year. Honestly, I was planning to slip away somewhere. Maybe the Carolina mountains, just me and a thermos of black coffee. But Mom called again. Isa, sweetheart, I'm not feeling well. No one's up to cooking this year. We're all looking forward to the holiday, you know. I knew. They didn't want me for who I was. They wanted me because someone had to do the work. I paused for a moment. Don't worry, I said. I'll take care of it. In truth, I had already called a high-end catering service from Charlotte, the same one I use for my firm's auction receptions. This Thanksgiving, I had a plan. And this time, they were going to see exactly who I had become. The catering team I hired specialized in private dinners for collectors, custom-designed menus where every dish was a piece of art from the seasoning to the final sprig of herbs. I paid for everything with my company's secondary card. No one knew. No one asked. They just assumed I'd somehow gotten lucky and knew a few chefs. Thanksgiving morning, I arrived early to set everything up. An hour later, a fleet of white vans pulled into the driveway. Portable ovens, silver trays, high-end dishware, even a professional tablescape designer arranging blooms and candles like it was a wedding. Lily caught a glimpse of the staff and leaned toward Mom, whispering loud enough for me to hear. Isn't Isla going a little overboard? Looks like she's trying to impress someone. I smiled to myself. Impress someone? There was no one left I needed to impress. I just wanted one real meal, no boxed stuffing, no dry turkey drowning in salty gravy. Dinner was served right on time. The house was full. Grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, and of course Lily and her latest boyfriend. All gasping over the food, snapping pictures for Instagram. I didn't say much. I just poured wine past plates and kept smiling. Midway through the meal, I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom to check on a live auction happening in Tokyo. A longtime client was bidding on a rare Meiji-era gemstone set, and I couldn't afford to miss a detail. I logged onto my laptop, headset in my ear, following the rising bids and authentication confirmations. That's when the door slammed open. Lily. Hey, do you have an iPhone charger? My phone's about to die, she said, barging in without a glance. Her eyes flickered to my laptop screen. Account dashboards, bid tracking, authentication reports. Her gaze froze, then narrowed. Without asking, she scooped up my laptop. Let's show everyone what Isla's been secretly working on. Before I could stop her, she was halfway down the stairs, holding it up like a prize. Guys, look what Isla's doing. The room fell into a stunned, aching silence. On the screen, a business account balance showing $12,600,000, 0 cents. A pending authentication contract for $400,000, 0 cents. Internal quarterly reports from Silver Lane and Ivy, listing multi-million-dollar revenues. Silence thicker than gravy. Mom chuckled nervously, stabbing at her stuffing. Oh, Isla's probably just helping someone with paperwork, right, sweetheart? I straightened my sleeves and stepped forward. No, Mom, I said clearly, my voice steady. I'm not helping someone else. I'm the CEO of Silver Light and Ivy. We operate 3 offices across 3 states, specializing in antique authentication and estate asset appraisal. Someone dropped a fork. Aunt Margaret gasped. Grandpa rubbed his temples in disbelief. Lily gripped the back of her chair, trembling. You've been sitting on millions while Mom and Dad are drowning in debt for me? As I turned to my parents. I've been sending you $7,000, 0 cents a month for over 2 years. Mom's face went pale. Dad's jaw clenched tightly. Lily's voice broke into a sob. You should have told me. I'm your sister. Family's supposed to share. I looked at each of them, the ones who once dismissed, ignored, and overlooked me, and I spoke carefully. Family isn't about using the people you underestimate. I closed the laptop with a soft click and moved toward the door. Someone shouted about duties, about obligations. Dad slammed his fist against the table. You should be ashamed, he barked. No matter what you've built, you're still our daughter. Families share everything. I scanned the room. Their eyes weren't proud. They were greedy, seeing me not as Isla, but as a vault they'd just cracked open. I said softly. You just never wanted to see it? You never even asked? I adjusted my jacket, lifted my chin, and walked out, past the food, past the wine glasses, past the stairs. No one followed. No one clapped. And no one congratulated me. Only the steady, certain rhythm of my own heartbeat in my ears, a sound stronger than any applause I could have asked for. This time, I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I was the one leaving them behind. Every time you called crying, saying you couldn't manage, I didn't ask why. I didn't set conditions. I just quietly sent the money. And this is how I'm repaid? Mom's voice snapped back. Why didn't you tell us you were successful? Was it because you didn't want to help us, or because you wanted it all to yourself? I tightened my grip on the water glass, keeping my voice steady. Because I got used to being invisible, I said quietly. Ever since Caleb was born, I stopped being a priority. Every award I won, every exam I aced, it was forgotten. Because your brother needs quiet or your brother needs rest. I turned my gaze directly to her. Do you remember when I got a perfect SAT score? Or when I earned a full scholarship? And, Dad, I said, voice sharpening, do you remember my high school graduation? You didn't come. Everyone was too busy watching Caleb's 5th grade science fair. Mama's hands trembled slightly, lips moving but no words came out. I breathed slowly, willing my voice not to shake. And now that you finally see what I built without your help, your first reaction isn't pride, it's anger, because I didn't share it with you. That's not it, Lily cut in desperately. I'm just shocked, I feel. Betrayed. You didn't trust me? I turned toward her, expression hard. You never trusted me. You laughed at me. In front of your friends, you told them I lived off Mom and Dad, when all this time, it was my money paying for your semesters, your trips, your vacations. Lily froze, eyes wide, stunned, that I knew. Mom's voice cracked. Isla, I'm not trying to fight. But you can't hoard that kind of fortune and expect the family to pretend nothing changed. We need help. You could start a fund. For Lily, she wants to open her own interior design firm. I raised an eyebrow. You mean, I said slowly, you want me to bankroll another dream that might last 3 months? Without a word, I pulled out my phone, scrolled quickly, and tapped a few buttons. I just canceled the automatic transfers. The explosion was instant. Isla, you can't do that, Mom shouted, half rising from her seat. Your father and I were counting on that. Lily hasn't even finished her degree. I stood, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Then maybe it's time she figured it out. I've been on my own since I was 17, I said, voice clear and calm. If I can do it, so can the rest of you. No one moved to stop me, but I turned back one last time. If the only reason you want me around is money, I shook my head, then I'm done buying love. I don't need it anymore. No huns. No apologies. Just angry murmurs following me to the door. As I stepped outside into the crisp November air, I heard someone yell about lawyers. Someone else muttered, "She'll regret this." I didn't even flinch. I closed the heavy wooden door behind me, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. Back at my apartment that night, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Call after call, message after message. The first few were from Mom. "Asla, you're tearing the family apart. We need to talk. Lily's heartbroken. Can't you see she's lost faith? Family is supposed to be where you come back to, not what you walk away from." Then a colder, shorter text from Dad. "I don't know who you've become, but this isn't how family treats family." By message 37, it was Lily. "You're ruining everything. You'll regret this." I turned the phone off, placing it face down on the table, like it could somehow silence the storm. But the next day it followed me. My company email was flooded with spam, not from strangers, but from uncles, cousins, even Dad's old friends' wives. People who used to say, "Isla's sweet even if she's not brilliant." I called Marcus, the lawyer who'd handled my VIP clients' estate cases. When I showed him the message threads, he didn't blink. He simply nodded once. "You need a full, clean financial break," he said. "I'll draft cease and desist letters today." I asked him to add one final line at the bottom of each letter. True love doesn't come with an invoice. A week later, Lily posted a long cryptic caption on Instagram. "Not everyone with money has a heart." Alongside the caption were old photos. Me holding her as a baby. Me at her high school graduation. Me at her birthday dinner. The comments split into two camps. Some called me a heartless ATM. Others asked why a future MBA graduate was using ancient photos to play the victim. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a small worn wooden box tucked away in my closet, the one Grandma Marlene gave me when I turned 15. Inside was a vintage pearl necklace, a single pearl on a faded gold chain. I fastened it around my neck, a piece of memory, a piece of survival. Not because it was valuable, but because it reminded me. The rarest treasures are the ones nobody saw coming. Grandma Marlene was the only family member I hadn't blocked. When I called and told her everything, she didn't sound surprised. She just sighed, long and low. "You finally did what you should have done years ago, sweetheart." I stayed silent, staring out my window at the gray skyline. She continued, her voice steady but full of the strength I'd clung to since I was a little girl. "Family isn't the people who pull you back when you're trying to fly. You've lived in their shadows long enough. It's time you choose your own light." The following week, I invited her to stay with me for a few days. She arrived with a small floral suitcase and a tin of butter cookies she'd baked herself. We spent hours in my living room, sorting through a gem collection I'd just acquired from Switzerland, the kind of collection that once would have been far beyond my reach. She watched me work, that same quiet smile on her face, like her whole life had been leading up to watching me truly stand on my own. After she arrived, I changed everything. I switched all my personal numbers, scrubbed my addresses from every system linked to Silverlight and Ivy. My receptionist was instructed to turn away any walk-ins claiming to be family without an appointment. I signed a lease for a new company headquarters in a secure building, complete with biometric locks and private security. One Monday morning, while reviewing exhibit plans over coffee, Marcus called. "Looks like things are quiet, at least on paper." I just smiled. Because silence didn't mean acceptance. It meant reluctance. And it didn't matter anymore. I no longer needed their approval to exist. Grandma once told me, a true gem doesn't need to shout its worth. It just needs to stop burying itself among the rocks. I finally understood. I'd been set in the right place, and no one was dragging me back again. That March, I moved into my new home, a modest mid-century villa outside Madison, Wisconsin, overlooking Lake Mendota. It wasn't flashy. It was private. It had everything I needed: a security fence, AI surveillance, a vault designed to bank specifications, and peace. I set up my office by hand: a warm amber lamp, a soft leather chair, and a vintage mahogany bookshelf that smelled of old bookstores and childhood dreams. For the first time in my life, I lived in a space where I didn't have to shrink, where I didn't have to dim my light to make anyone else feel bigger. No more Sunday dinners full of thinly veiled jabs. No more pretending I was just getting by. I was fully Isla, and that was more than enough. Unexpectedly, my company grew even stronger after the rupture. Clients who had seen Lily's petty posts reached out privately, trusting me more for my quiet integrity. A renowned fashion house in New York hired me to authenticate a vintage jewelry line for an upcoming exhibition. A European museum invited me to join a restoration project, reviving lost treasures of the 18th century. I hired 2 new specialists, expanded our Denver office, signed partnerships with 3 major international auction houses. At a strategic meeting, my CFO hesitated before saying, "Isla, we're positioned to acquire a smaller firm in the South. If you're ready, this could be a major leap." I smiled. I had never chased power. What I had always wanted was freedom. One misty morning, I sat by my upstairs window, sipping black tea, watching Grandma Marlene water the garden in her sky blue cardigan. She had stayed longer than planned, and I hadn't asked her to leave. One evening, as we sorted gemstones, she said, "You know what I'm most proud of?" I shook my head. She didn't say Wafa. She didn't say Korea. She said, "That you stayed true to yourself even when the price was high." Her words stayed with me. I thought of all the years I'd stayed silent, trying to earn love. All the times I tried to be useful, just to be seen. I didn't need that anymore, because the person I needed to prove myself to had always been me. While sorting a shipment one afternoon, I found it. The pale lavender stone swan hairpin from Grandma's attic. It wasn't worth much in money, but it was priceless in meaning. I wrapped it in velvet, placed it in my private gallery, and wrote one note. For the girl who once felt invisible, you became a light no one saw coming. Soon after, an invitation arrived to speak at an international heritage conference in Paris. This time, I didn't hesitate. I wasn't afraid of overshadowing anyone. I wasn't afraid of being seen. I was Isla Bennett, standing in my own light, wearing Grandma's white gold ring, ready to tell my story, no longer for validation, but for freedom. Because real healing isn't just surviving what hurt you, it's refusing to live one more day believing you weren't enough. If you've stayed with me through my story, thank you. I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself, even when it hurt? Please share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. We don't heal in silence. We heal by standing together. If you connected with anything I lived through, let me know. I read every word. And if there's one piece of advice I can leave you with, it's this. You don't have to keep shrinking to fit into places you've outgrown. You have permission to stand in your own light.